This is the Serial at Midnight podcast. Hello and welcome to the Serial at Midnight podcast. My name is Heath Holland, and in this episode we're talking all about Ghostwatch with the director of Ghostwatch. Now, people in the UK might be more familiar with what Ghostwatch is than those in the United States or maybe other parts of the world, but I realize that the reputation of Ghostwatch outside of Britain in the last really 5 to 10 years has it's snowballed. More and more people know about this, as they should. So just let me give a cursory introduction. So Ghostwatch was this 1992 BBC TV event. It's essentially a TV movie, but it was a documentary. It was shot in a documentary style, so you're not sure if it's real or not. And if this sounds familiar, if you're thinking of the Blair Witch Project or even maybe the WNUF Halloween special, things like this, all of these, the VHS found footage thing doesn't exist without Ghostwatch. This was really a pioneer. So it aired on Halloween night. The premise was, let's go see if there's this haunted house. Let's go see if we can find some ghosts. And they send people that the audience knew, television reporters and TV personalities. And it's all presented as if it was real. And it was so controversial. It was so upsetting to so many people. The BBC reportedly received 1 million phone calls about Ghostwatch in 1992. So the legacy of Ghostwatch is huge. And we're now celebrating the 30th anniversary. Now, you're about to hear my interview with the director, Lesley Manning, and she has so many interesting things to say. We learn about sort of how the project took place, how she made it. That's the most interesting thing, is what went into making this and pulling it off, and were they concerned about a possible backlash? Was there a backlash? Did it affect her career in any sort of a negative way? And we're looking at the legacy of Ghostwatch 30 years later. But that conversation is not complete without talking about this a new 30th anniversary Blu-ray presentation for 101 Films. Now, if you're watching the video version of this podcast, I'm showing it right now. So it is an incredible, this is a truly incredible package. So we have the original presentation of Ghostwatch on Blu-ray with a new 30th anniversary documentary that includes the involvement of so many people that were involved with the production. There is all sorts of added items. So there's a book of essays. Okay, there's a book of sort of an appreciation, helping us to put this in context. There's art cards that are included. The most interesting thing to me, and I talk about it with the director, is a miniature facsimile edition of the screenplay itself, of the script, complete with the director's notes. There are storyboards in here. There are, things are scratched out, things are highlighted. We get to see how this actually happened. And for so many, for a project this controversial, this is interesting to me because you get to see how it all took shape. So I would be remiss if I did not tell you that Ghostwatch has just received a 30th anniversary Blu-ray. So that informs this conversation. That's actually the thing that opened the doorway for me to have this conversation with Lesley Manning. But I think this is fascinating. If you ever want to see how it's sort of like a peek inside of a panic is what this is. But you also get to see, I'm interested in the craft side of things. I'm interested in how things like this come together. So I am so honored that I was able to speak with Lesley Manning here, and that she was as forthcoming with answers. It's just super easy to talk to, and I think you're going to have as much fun with this as I did. So here I'm going to go ahead and cut to it. This is my interview with the director of Ghostwatch, Lesley Manning. How does it feel to be talking about Ghostwatch 30 years after the fact?
Such an interesting question. Well, we were put in the dark for 10 years, so because they sort of like covered it up and pretended nothing had happened at the BBC for 10 years. So we were pretty excited to talk about it when people started to talk about it. And it's really when the BFI published the DVD 10 years later.
I have that edition right here.
Oh wow, yeah, cool. So actually, I don't mind. I really am happy to talk about it 30 years later. and thrilled to bits that people even want to watch it 30 years later. So that's cool.
It's well, there's places that I want to go in this conversation because the influence on this, the influence that you and the project has had in those 30 years, it's huge. I mean, this thing it has had such a long life, and it's inspired, you know, probably multiple generations of other filmmakers now. I just wonder, did you know any of this going into it? I know, like, well, here, let me start here. How did you come to film and television? I know you've directed theater, you've directed film, you've directed television, you do shorts. When did you know you wanted to do this? Was this like a dream from when you were a small child, or did it come, you know, university?
To be a director.
Just to be in film, just to work with film, just to tell stories.
Yeah. Oh God. So I was an art college kid. And I always loved making stuff. My dad always shot Super 8, which was I think a big unconscious lead. And I think really it was at art college I started to show films. And they were quite, like, some of them were quite obscure. And at art college I was watching some obscure films, and then one afternoon I took myself down to the cinema and watched Jaws, and I thought, this is it. This is so good.
And you thought to yourself, one day I'm going to terrify terrify the entire Great Britain.
I did I did write to an American company, I think, when I was about 17, and said, you know, can I work? I can't remember which studio it was. Well, of course they thought I was a boy because of Lesley.
Yeah.
And they said, oh no, you have to do a little bit more. But yeah.
I want to hear more about this. What did you say? Did you want to do like how did you want to, what job were you asking for? What did you want to do?
I don't know. I just
mailroom.
I remember I was still at art college. Anything, to be honest, anything. Yeah. I think I just said I want to come and work for your studio.
Well, I know you started, you know, working in, you know, directing and as early as the 80s.
Yeah.
What can you just tell me a little bit about I don't want this to just be, we are here ostensibly to talk about Ghostwatch, but I don't want you to feel limited to just Ghostwatch, because I know you've had this rich career before and after. Kind of lead me up to your work before Ghostwatch.
Okay, so art college, I did start to make films, even though we didn't have any tutor. Me and my best friend found a Bolex, and so we started to churn film out. We didn't know how to sync it up. I remember being in a room knee deep with bits of mag and bits of film, but we did put stuff together. And then from that, I went into the cutting rooms, at BBC cutting rooms, and where I actually thought the hub of the universe of filmmaking is in the edit room. So I did that for a while, and then for a couple of years. And I remember I was only on holiday release. I'd just been, you know, I'd been employed every 2 weeks for about 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I went up for this review and then they said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to direct. And they burst out laughing. So I thought, okay, I need to focus a bit on how to do this, because it's not going to happen within the industry that way. Mm-hmm. So I had my little art college films, and I had a little animated film, to be honest, that I put through the BBC baths for a bottle of whiskey. I bribed the guy, because they still had film going through for the news rooms. So every night the bath would go with the news footage, so you know, for a bottle of whiskey, put my little film through, and I applied to national films and got in, and that was a bit of a game changer. Because I could make a couple of films and got more confident and knew a bit more about what I was trying to do. I came out, did cut music videos for the great and the good, and then decided I want to throw it all in and really direct. And I got a break in TV for first-time directors, making a documentary about Lindy Hoppers. It was a black dance group that was street dance group, but who were electric. I mean, they learned all their stuff from American films. They just learned it off, off secondhand from the TV, and they were brilliant. So I made a little film about them, and actually that little promo got me the gig for the TV thing. So I've always, everything in my life, I've had to make it and then remake it. You have to prove yourself a lot. And then I went quite fast through to drama. That was a little documentary where I went through to drama, serials, and then the BBC films. And I did a really lovely film called My Sister Wife, which was all about an Asian thriller. And from that, it was the same producer, and we were in the dubbing theatre, and she said, look, I've got this script, would you like to read it? It's a bit techie, subtext, you're a girl, can you cope? And I said, no, I'd love to read it. I'm art college, I am really, and I did animation. I felt very, very comfortable with effects, yeah, I loved the script. I was totally hooked by a moment in the script where Michael Parkinson, who's the presenter, goes, there's nothing there and there's something there. And I was just hooked with how that would affect people watching in their sitting room. At the door, standing at the door, shouting to the kitchen, Michael Parkinson can't see anything, but I can. That's how I got to Ghostwatch.
Oh, there's so much that I want to talk about. So, well, you talk. This is the script. The new Blu-ray edition from 101 Films includes like a facsimile of the script with your notes and your annotations. There's like little storyboards here. I think I'll try to find them here, but
there are tons of storyboards. I left most of them out. On every other page. Like if you imagine my script, every left-hand side back, was covered in little thumbnail sketches.
Just for example, I'm gonna hold this up for the camera so that people can see what I'm talking about. But it's fascinating. So one is fascinating that you were comfortable having this distributed on, as a commercial product, but also just letting people into your process. I think that's there's like a transparency there that I really respect.
As you can imagine, it was a highly technical process because it came from the film department, but I insisted we should do it as TV, as on tape, which upset the film department because they only made films on film. So I was hired in that department, so I wanted to make it on tape, but we exploded the whole process out. So it wasn't shot in one night. It was shot over 4 weeks as a film shoot, rather than 4.5 weeks. So we shot the house first and then the studio, and we larded that in behind their head. So everything was incredibly technical in that sense. Every time we looked at the parapsychologist, there would have to be something behind her, either leading into Michael's next thing or at least a card. So we had to know every time what was on the wall. So technically that wall had never been done before because it wasn't, even those video walls had been done, but we had pre-cut VHS or pneumatics going into 1 million machines to make that wall. So we'd sort of unpicked the whole television language and had to make it work for ourselves. All the cameras were shot individually and taken back into the cutting room and cut by a film editor. So, so that little key at the front is all about what is effects, special effects, what is charisma. I mean, I had a quick look at it. There's tons of charisma, the titling, what could be done before, what could be done after, what had to be done for that particular day's shoot. There were loads of notes that me and the editor were making about what had to be available for the day shoot in the studio. So technically it was really complex in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer?
Yeah. I just wanted to hear kind of your process because it is, when you watch the deception is that, oh, this is happening live. We're watching this live, even though, and we can talk about this as well, because some people got it, some people didn't. But it is an incredibly well thought out, well structured, well planned production, and I have to imagine that so much thought went into it. It sounds like it did. Talk to me about you. Like, you have you kept the screenplay, you have the notes, and you shared this. You were okay being transparent, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, it didn't occur to me that it would ever be a problem, I think. I mean, there was a lot of storyboarding I didn't show, partly because the drawing's so poor. Um, uh, I don't know. I don't know why I just didn't think it's a problem. Why? Do you think people guard it with their lives?
No, I just think that certain artists are very protective of their craft and of their process. And I think that this is great because it represents a learning tool for younger filmmakers and for people like me who can see the work that went into it, see how it actually took form. Not everybody's interested in that, but I am. And that's why we have audio commentaries. So many. I remember the early days of DVD and what it meant to be able to sit and watch a film with the person that made the film. And, sometimes they don't have anything to say, well, this is the shot where they just tell you what's happening on screen. But when you can get into the process and the decision making as a film fan and we're talking about the arts, I think that's a remarkable thing to share. And it's a teaching tool. And it's also, it's ultimately a very educational, inclusion, and so I'm grateful for it. But not everybody would have. Some people would have been like, "Oh, I don't want to share that."
I suppose. Well, I feel very secure that the things that make really good films are the choices that directors make, and writers and designers and editors
and editors,
and everybody involved. It's the choices that you make, guided by the director's taste and choices, and I feel those are. There's you can't put your finger on that. What I've shown is my process, how I thought, and I really enjoy my script in the sense because I keep the layers. Sometimes, as you see, I stick over when Stephen and I changed, wanted a line changed, or indeed a character came in as Mike Smith, who was in fact related to Sarah Green in real life. So then it actually needed to be altered. So I've just stuck it on top because it was pretty much we were on hard copy. So it's instead of keeping printing out, it wasn't like on computers. So there was an awful lot of cut and paste. So, yeah. So I still think that, your choices are your own,
yes.
But your process is like, cool, let everybody see.
That's great. Well, something I'm curious about is, do you have to have an element? So this is a scary story. This is I don't know. Would you consider it horror? I don't know. It's a unique thing.
That's interesting. Well, it's called horror. I think it's called horror here.
Do you have to have a belief when you approach this material? Do you have to have a belief in the supernatural story, the matter itself? Do you have to have any belief of your own to effectively tell the story? Or is it just, I mean, we've talked about the technical aspect of it. Is it just, here's the work that needs to be done? Does belief is it required for this kind of thing?
I don't think it is required, but I do, well, the vox pop in the piece were real people with real experiences. And we interviewed them. They came in to speak to us before we filmed them. And I was very humbled by that because they were very grateful. They would come in and be a little bit suspicious of you or aggressive. And when they realized that I genuinely was interested to hear their stories, genuinely, they would open up like a confessional. And I felt sort of humbled by that because I do feel people have experiences. I haven't, but I do feel people. So in that sense, I do believe, and or at least I have respect.
Yeah. Well, there is based sort of inspired by, is it the Infield Poltergeist? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and so it tapped into a lot of I guess we should talk a little bit about the the actual event. See, there's a lot of Americans are going to watch. There's people in the United States, and this was not something. I think it's being found now. You know, I have the DVD and now the Blu-ray, and thanks to the new edition, which has lovely new extras, including a feature that features you, and we have the script. More people are discovering this outside of its original audience.
Yeah.
But for those that might know, well, what is this? They're just curious. I mean, it was like I've seen the term mockumentary used, and I don't that implies to me that implies like comedy or something like that. But it was done in a very realistic style. A story about ghosts. It's Halloween night. Are we going to see a ghost? Is essentially what the documentary is, or what the project is. Was there a conversation before, like as you're coming onto this, between you and between Steven, the writer? Was there any conversation about the War of the Worlds thing from the Orson Welles War of the Worlds scare, I guess is what it was, kind of a panic? It was very, you guys kind of repeated that maybe unwittingly, but I was just wondering if there was any awareness of that, and that you might be headed down that path before this started.
It was mentioned, but we thought we would it was the only thing that was mentioned, because like fan footage wasn't even a term then, or there was tons of terms and examples that hadn't happened. So I remember it being mentioned by producer and Stephen, but we weren't setting out to. We felt that we were hoping that maybe for the first 10 minutes people might think it's a live program. But we didn't think we'd get much further than that. So we didn't. I seriously feel, I mean, people use hoax, spoof, or loads of, mockumentary, whatever. And I don't know if it shows, but I so didn't approach the work that way. I really wanted the story, and this is my approach to any script really, is from inside out, really get under the skin of the script and lift it from the page and do everything I can, and slightly riff with it, but from there and come out with it. And once we'd cottoned on to the language, once I'd written the language for myself, I knew the cameras I wanted to use. I didn't want to break the language. I did on a couple of occasions, but because you have to break your own rules, and you never should really set yourself rules, too many. But like, I knew the language that I wanted to create and keep pretty pure to it. And so then it sort of opens up hundreds of doors of like, oh, we could shoot it like this, we could shoot it like that, because you've got this sort of corridor that you can riff off. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think the challenge too would be getting people. They're giving performances, but you don't want it to look like a performance. It's got to feel natural.
Oh my God, yeah, that was such an interesting journey. That was such an interesting journey, because for me, I mean, I asked the actors to watch documentaries and sort of come back with notes, and also like I watched tons of documentaries, and I was actually really interested in how, when people talk about stuff that really affects them, or trauma or bereavement, how it catches them not on the words. So in many ways, drama had a different way of, drama uses subtext in one way, and documentary, the subtext isn't matched to the words. It sort of pops out somewhere else. And I found that fascinating. And also then working with the people who weren't actors, like Michael Parkinson and Sarah Green to an extent, although she'd had training and was a bit more savvy. Like we had to move to make him, put him in his comfort zone, so that he wasn't, to learn the script, he was then like on auto cue, which actually has its own pretense, and I didn't want that. So we brought that back and gave him points, and we said, you have to hit this point in the script, in those chunks. With Gillian, who was word perfect, we were saying, you've got to bring out this point and that point, and ideally finish on this point. And he got it. He was really good. And then he could mine his own wonderful, slightly cynical but very warm interview style. which he was famous for in this country. I don't know, does he appear across in America at all?
Not really. I know him, but I follow a lot of British productions and stuff, so I know him, but I don't think most people would know who he is.
He had a reputation for being very generous to whoever he's interviewing, and some interviewers you can hear and feel it's all about them and not who they're interviewing, but Michael Parkinson was always very generous about that, and very interesting to listen and watch. And so we wanted to tap into that. We wanted to make sure it was his thumbprint.
One of the things that's also interesting to me is you're talking in the new feature on the Blu-ray, you talk about how the BBC's kind of turning a blind eye to a lot of this while it's happening. You're like, well, it's being filmed, and there's someone there with building a file of like the concerns that need to be addressed, and they're like, it's okay. And then of course after, when there's like I believe 1 million people called to say about this, and the BBC's like, well, hold on a second, and then there's the file with everything that had been recorded the whole time. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Okay, so Richard Brooke, who's great and sadly passed, there. Okay, so there's quite a short in those days. It was a very short chain of command in the BBC. So Ruth, was my producer, and her exec was Richard Brooke, and both of them, I have to give 100% credit for the maverick nature and how they got behind this. And Richard was a smart exec and had done 2 or 3 really successful pieces of TV. But he also knew that this might need some attention, and they had regular meetings, and he would say, I've got this program that I just want to talk about, and they go, oh yeah, Richard, we all know you've done great work, Tumbledown was brilliant, yeah, just shut up. So he was trying to say that we should all look at this seriously. And it never happened, and he did actually collate all the minutes, and I sort of have this funny feeling, because it's quite a slow burn at the beginning with Ghostwatch. I have this funny feeling that the execs watched the first 10 minutes two nights before it went out and thought, and also not only that, I actually think they couldn't understand the language. They saw the realism and didn't think, because I've got somewhere in my cupboard somewhere and sort of an email that Richard passed on to me, which was like, oh, what's she doing? How, it's not even drama. It's just like, it all looks so real. I mean, what's going on?
What? Okay, and so then it comes out, and it's, we know it's controversial. Well, what was the immediate? So I'm like the 1st of November. What's your life like? What happens?
Well, we could start on the 31st, because Ruth wanted us off the street, sort of. I think she was still in the War of the Worlds mode, and she wanted us off the street so nobody would go, you're not making live TV. So we all had this party in a sailing club in Chiswick, which seemed to me was just a bar and a space with a TV in a corner, and Mike Smith brought some popcorn, and it was just a bit of it was just a laugh. Ruth came back ashen-faced and said, the phone lines are all jammed. And it has a flag on the programme, which we manned twice. So there's BBC phones that would listen to complaints or whatever. And then we out of our budget, put a whole nother load of people answering phones, because we thought people might be spooked by it or whatever. Mm-hmm. So they were all jammed, and so she went, oh my God. And then the 1st of November was the tabloids. Actually, it was the Sunday papers, wasn't it? So then, they just went mad. I mean, they just started to dig deep. Sarah Green phoned me and said, I'm coming round, I've been doorstepped. And I thought, oh God, I'm going to have to clean the house.
So what was your family's reaction? Like your close, your inner circle, did they know about it ahead of time? Did you warn anybody, or did you think that was even necessary?
No, I remember I showed it to my husband before, as a rough cut, as a cut in the process, and just to see what he thought about it. And I remember him leaving the settee while he was watching. He like just jumped up and went, "Oh my God, that works." So so I thought, oh, okay, so maybe we're okay. Yeah. So no, nobody. I don't know. No.
Okay.
Yeah. My dad and mum used to phone and go, "Oh, well done," when something went out on TV.
You said that it was, I don't remember how you phrased it at the beginning of our conversation, but that for 10 years this was sort of put in a box. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Well, BBC didn't know how to cope with the attention. They didn't know. I think, and I don't really know, but I think they really misunderstood it. I don't think that we took them by surprise in the sense that they didn't know about the program. That's not true at all. I mean, you can't commission a 90-minute drama and not know about it. It takes years to get there. So that's not the situation. The thing is, they just didn't understand it. They didn't understand that it was going to work in the way it did. And they also equally, I think it's a huge corporation, and I just think that nobody could take responsibility then or knew how to, and so in the end it was easier to just put it in the vault and pretend it hadn't happened.
Did it affect you negatively? Did that silence from the BBC affect you negatively?
It's really, really, do you mean my career?
Yeah, or personally? I mean, either way.
Oh yeah, Stephen and I were like, it was interesting because I mean we did do some more work and then some sort of ghost stories as well, but there was a type, if you were walking around the corridor, someone would take you aside and go, "Oh God, I really love that." They wouldn't, and nobody could say it aloud in the corridor, for some reason. It was a guilty pleasure that some execs might have had. There wasn't, nobody would say it out aloud. And it did split people. I think it did split some producers. I think they thought that we had broken faith with the nation. Auntie had broken faith with the nation, was the phrase. And so some loved it and some thought it was irresponsible. I think that's how it goes. Did it affect me negatively? God, how do you know? I suppose those producers who thought it was irresponsible probably wouldn't have employed me. I think there are so many things that I don't know. It's impossible to say.
Okay. Well, I was just wondering if you felt like doors are being slammed, or if you were on a path and then all of a sudden there's a halt. No, you're dangerous. That sort of a thing.
I think there was a general. Oh God, I wouldn't be able to tell it, and actually it'd be horrible to think that was the case. But it was difficult. I tell you what I found difficult actually was, and I think might be more pertinent, was that I directed films for TV, 90-minute films for TV, and my sister wife picked up loads of prizes, and was a really good piece of work, I think, and unusual in its day anyway, and Ghostwatch is what it is, and there wasn't really anywhere else for me to go, and that was quite tricky. And there was a lot of all those screen ones, which is Ghostwatch was one of those screens, lots of really good filmmakers there, a lot of them now in America, and there were, out of 91 productions, there were 3 women, and I think that possibly has some position in it. I think it was quite difficult to keep employing women. Maybe not so much now, but I just think it was possibly a bit tricky then. 30 years ago.
Do you think that's improving?
I hope so. I definitely, on the surface it's improving. Superficially there's an awful lot of talk, and people are getting more breaks, which is great. It was really good. I don't know, it's quite a long history of second-class citizenship, it's quite difficult to reverse, I think, from unconscious bias. No, I do think people are trying. I do think people are really trying. Yeah, I feel it now anyway. Interestingly, with Ghostwatch coming out with this 30-year sort of gathering of, it seems to still go. That's good, because it is a bit more of a positive time for me.
Tell me a little bit about, I know you followed this with, you directed, there was a Ghost, like a TV series that seems similarly related. You directed 2 of 6 episodes, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, Ghosts, yeah.
Was it like, oh, more Ghosts, we're doing that again? Or was it something you were happy to do?
Oh, no, they were great. They were very different. Well, they were very, very different because they were much more classical drama stories. So, they were great. Massage I did with Stephen. That was huge fun. Yeah, and then I did 3 Miles Up, which is completely different, and just all tension. I think it sort of doesn't have the same endings that Stephen supplies, but yeah, it's cool.
What's inspiring you? What I know you're doing theater things. What stories are attracting you right now? And as a follow-up question, are those stories harder to find than they used to be? Like, is there material that, for lack of a better word, is there material that's turning you on? Is there stuff that you're really interested in getting your hands on?
Oh my God, there are so many stories I want to tell. Yeah, there's so many good stories out there. I mean, so there's a couple there's one I've written that's getting a bit of attention. Well, 2, and then Stephen and I got something else. There are so many good stories. Yes, I do feel my roots are, Jaws, Jewel, Blood Simple. Those are my roots. Those are the things I really love. I love the tension. I love to be on the edge of my seat. I'm very hard on British cinema because, usually in a few frames you can go, whoa, is this going to be am I going to be sat here, enwrapped for 90 minutes, or am I not? And that's the only sin, I think, when I read a script, the only sin is to be bored. That's the only sin. I don't care how it comes. I don't care what it is, as long as I think, oh my God, there's something really interesting, and I really want to know the next moment.
Well, here in America, we're experiencing something where it's the theatrical, they're only making popcorn movies, really. They make movies that aren't popcorn movies, but they either don't come to theaters, or they're in sometimes my theater, I have, AMC is a chain that's purchased like so many theaters in the United States. And so they've kind of got this is my bias. It's kind of got a stranglehold on the theatrical release system. And some of these smaller independent films, probably that you would be interested in making, stories you'd be interested in telling, may show on a Thursday night at 7 p.m. once, and then they leave. They show one time in the theater. But, the latest Fast and the Furious movie or whatever is going to be there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so it feels, for me, it's getting harder and harder to find the kinds of stories that I want to see and that I want to connect with. You're on another side of that. You're on the creative side of that. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about that. Is there opportunities for the kinds of stories that you want to tell, or is it just getting, I'm not super familiar with what the theatrical scene in Britain is like right now. When I say theatrical, I mean cinematic scene.
Yeah.
If it's, if it's being overtaken by the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the independent film is, if you talk to a producer, they just wince. And if you talk to an agent, they wince as well. They just think all that effort, nobody sees it, nobody makes any money. They think, 9 times out of 10. And so it's a really, really difficult model financially and business wise, really difficult. I feel quite optimistic about it, because I think it's in its worst period now. And I suppose the optimism I have is that then the budgets get knocked down so low that nobody can ignore it, and then these things bust through, directors bust through as well, and little stories bust through, and not, when I say little, cheap, but big stories. So I'm always optimistic that it's not going to die. And I really do feel I love watching that 90-minute story from anywhere, as long as I'm not bored. So I do think it will survive somehow. I do. It's just it's in a really bad state. It is. We have the same thing. I mean, our cinema chains are going, and really interesting. Yeah, they're sort of a bit dying at the moment. What's really interesting in my area now, in Ealing, it's called the Ealing Project. It's the only cinema in our vicinity, and it's a community cinema, and it shows all the blockbusters and the independents, and sometimes piped theatre. So and it's got 4 really great screens. And then the next district, this is London, in Chiswick, a suburb of London, they have a private cinema that cineasts have started, which has got a 1 Michelin star restaurant attached to it. There's just really inventive ways, and all of them have these great seats, and that you can eat and drink there. Wow. And so I think it's really interesting how things might. I don't think it'll go the independent cinema and the independent project. Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly difficult if you go mainstream. Also, one of our major problems is being satellite to you a bit, is that you get a great script, you feel the money can come, but it's all dependent on the star. And now, since COVID as well, they're all double banked and booked for 6 years on Netflix and up and down and across. And so is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? So the independents now can't find their little name to make them even slightly viable. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe there'll be more stars created, like Netflix is creating stars.
Well, on the note of Netflix, how do you feel about creating, programs, films, shorts that are for a primarily digital, they're going straight to a digital platform? Do you mind that? Do you like that?
I really, I really don't mind, because television or what you see on your screen that's made for the streamers and television is very high quality now. And when I started, it was like, if you're in TV, it was a real struggle to get across to film. But now, if you're in TV, there's crossovers all the time. So I honestly, for me, it's all about storytelling. It really is all about storytelling. I don't care if it's Super 8, Netflix. I really don't. I think if it's a great, if you're there and you get it and you somehow pass over something to your audience, I think that's the brilliant thing.
Well, I definitely want to recommend people to your website, lesleymanning.com, because they can see some of the. Are there any entire films up there? I know that there's a few clips. They can see your work. Is my point.
Yeah.
So I'd like people to go check that out. Where else would you reference people? Are you doing any theater work right now? Are you undertaking anything else?
No, I'm really trying to make this film. We're trying to find an independent film. We're trying to find the last bit of money. I am doing theatre in the middle of the year. We found a venue for that. So, God, it's all about money. If someone gave me loads of money, I'd make loads of films. Just putting that plug right in there.
Do a Kickstarter or like an Indiegogo campaign or something.
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I appreciate your honest answers, and it's been a delight.
Thank you. It's been a huge pleasure.
All right, there you have it. There's an amazing insight into a global phenomenon that is still picking up steam. It was a UK event when it first happened, but now this is becoming an annual tradition. Ghostwatch is becoming an annual tradition in different parts of the world. Different, TV streaming networks are picking up on this, and it's really becoming this annual tradition of Halloween and what remains like a landmark of basically scaring the pants off the public. So once again, I'm going to reference you to the Ghostwatch 30th Anniversary Blu-ray. If you've never seen it, or if you love the movie, you got to check out this Blu-ray release that includes heavy involvement from the people involved with the film itself. And I will put links in the description of this so that you can easily pick this up, support Cereal at Midnight, and get something awesome for yourself. But I just had a blast with this conversation. I thought that Lesley Manning was incredibly easy to talk to and had so much insight into just how drama works and what's necessary to create the best story. You really get to see, for me, as I say earlier in my introduction, the craft aspect of this is what's interesting to me, because how does something like this happen? And I'm really grateful that I was that I had this opportunity. So, guys, we have so many more cool things coming up for this podcast. We are not slowing down. This is picking up steam. So I want you to definitely be a part of it. Please subscribe to this podcast. Please review this podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Give those thumbs ups. The best thing that you can do is to engage. So if that's a comment, if that's a review, if that's telling your friends, posting this on some message boards for the things that we talk about, however you can do it, I would just really appreciate you helping to get the word of this podcast out there, because the competition is stiff, you guys. It is so hard to get noticed at this stage in the podcast game when everybody's, such a flooded marketplace. But I know you're here because you appreciate the content, and I want to thank you for that. Exciting things coming up. I have so many things that are either already recorded or that are about to be recorded that I cannot wait to share with you. So please subscribe so you don't miss anything. Guys, I appreciate you so very much. Take care, and until next time, I will catch you later.